Hey guys, yeah, this is now episode 13 of the Rugby Recap. You have myself as well as the Kiwi lads. First of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, mate. I guess I should say bonjour to yourself. You are in Paris
Indeed.
currently. Enjoyed the game live between Scotland and the Springboks. We'll be breaking down that game alongside the others. Round one of the Rugby World Cup. I feel like there are a lot of talking points, some good, some bad. We'll be going through them for this podcast.
Exactly. And before we do so, guys, definitely click the like button, guys. Subscribe to our channel, and yeah, just leave a comment in terms of what you guys thought about the games overall for this week. But yeah, let's get straight into this. So, really, the first game, the opening game, and you can say arguably the biggest game I'd say of this first round, which was France versus New Zealand. Again, it's weird because there's not like either way, I really don't see the result. Of course, France did win at the end of the day, but I don't really see it as an upset. Is that really weird to say? Because at the end of the day, I think the French were kind of seen as favorites going into this game. But at the same time, if New Zealand were to win it, I also don't think it would be much of an upset. So it's a weird kind of game to have. But at the same time, obviously a very impressive result, to say the least. As a lot of French fans, I'd expect to be very happy, of course, because that does kind of mean that they'll obviously kind of finish first, technically, for what it is, in terms of what most people believe will happen in the group stages. But yeah, just what did you think about the game overall?
I think that it was very similar to Springboks versus All Blacks in terms of the way that the ABs played it. They are still really not getting the penalty count right, dropping the ball quite often. I think that late change of not having Sam Cane at number 7 meant that they had to try and make a few changes that they may not have liked to make.
Yeah,
but overall, France, they just look very strong in this opening game. They'll still look at it as they could have done more throughout certain moments. I know that the kicking aspect from both sides, a lot of times the ball went out on the full, a lot of times aimlessly kicking down and behind the opposition. But yeah, France to win the first game in your home Rugby World Cup, definitely the momentum booster and the morale booster that they'll be after the ABs. They went from losing a record margin to the Springboks to now losing their first ever Rugby World Cup group stage match. Talk about being in a situation where you've got to go starting at the bottom and now you're making your way up. Because now New Zealand versus Italy, that actually theoretically is a playoff game because whoever wins that will be finishing second. And it feels almost weird but exciting at the same time to say that Italy are in with a real shot here if the ABs aren't able to pull together and get themselves a victory. We've seen Ethan Blackadder, he has been added into the side that is in replacement of Imoni Narawa, so the forwards, they are trying to stack them a little bit more, but perhaps some of those guys that they've got there at the moment just aren't quite doing the job for the ABs.
Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, I just want to mention that with Ethan Blackadder, I think it's the right call to bring him in because, again, they always have that kind of tough spot, really, in deciding who's going to cover, really, Vazel, as well as Sam Cane going into this opening game. I mean, even Sam Cane's injury, just like, of course, it's like, he's actually done well in 2023, but of course, the game which he's meant to play, he's the captain, just isn't available to start. It's kind of his, rugby career, just put into a shell, really. But no, look, I was happy, obviously, Delta Papali got to play at 7, but yes, I am excited, obviously, to see Ethan Blackadder kind of be called up because, yeah, he's just a good player overall. Again, I was always going to see him kind of, I think he was anyway going to be introduced, with Scott Robinson down the future. But yeah, just good to see him obviously get an opportunity. And in replacement of Imoni Narawa, I feel bad for him because, again, it does mean that, like, they're not going to rely as much on wingers because I think they're now looking at, Leicester as well as Martelea. And then you've got the likes of, Kenneth Clark as well and Will Jordan. So I guess they say that 4 is good enough to have in terms of that winger department. And if you have to, obviously, you can shift Reiko as well. So there's a lot of options in what they have in that sense. So it's understandable. But, yeah, but I even saw the Ethan Blackadder video. I'm not sure if you saw this, but it was like from the Tasman, like where they let him know, oh yeah. So by the way, I just want to let you know that Ethan Blackadder is going to the World Cup, and it was like, whoa! It was kind of cool actually. It was like a whole group thing with them. But even like Anton Segner was like next to him. I was like, it doesn't look right, Blues and the Crusaders players next to each other. But anyway, I'll look past that for now. But no, look, I think overall in the game, I was pretty impressed actually. I'd say by, I mean, the All Blacks really took charge, I'd say, in the opening, 5 minutes of the game. I mean, they got literally the first try very quickly. And, of course, who else than Mark Talea to step up in the moments like this and get his. I mean, it is technically his first try in the Rugby World Cup. Just obviously it was a good try, really. I mean, I think it was correct me if I'm wrong, but it was Bowden Barrett, right? That did the kick.
Yeah. I think that may have also been the AB's downfall, though. We know with Bowden Barrett, when he gets a kick right, he tries it 20 more times, thinking every time it's going to pay off. Yep. And it just seemed to be that the All Blacks were giving away that ball aimlessly with those kick and chases. But yeah, Mark Delia, within the first 3 minutes of both halves, being able to cross the try line. And he was actually one of 7 players throughout round number 1 that got themselves 2 tries. No one quite has the hat trick yet. But 7 players, including, I believe it's about 3 or 4 forwards, means that this World Cup's wide open for not just the backs to be able to score, but some big forwards get themselves over the try line as well.
Exactly. And I guess in terms of the French, I mean, we have to obviously applaud them in terms of this victory because, it's a big statement obviously they've made in that opening game. And, it's a win which obviously will take them in, to the groups, out of the group stage, no matter what now. We can kind of have a bit of be a bit more loose, you could say, in the next few games now which they play in. But, it's exciting because, again, I mean, we'll touch on it later in terms of what this means from the opening round in terms of the knockouts. But, it's intriguing to see what happens in terms of that result. But, just overall, very impressive by French. I mean, that try that Damien Penon scored, I was like, woof! It was a pretty good try because, obviously just literally 2 minutes before then, Richard Monga did a try-saving tackle then, which is, I was pretty impressed by that one as well. But overall, I think the French were good on the day. I would say that Anthony Dupont he wasn't as effective, I'd say, as you would expect. I'd say in this game in particular. Again, maybe the All Blacks, made sure to kind of neutralize it, you could say, throughout this whole game, which is understandable. But overall, I thought it was a pretty impressive game to watch. Obviously, the French fans must be very happy. So a good win. They obviously start their campaign. But anyway, we'll move on then towards the second game, which happened, I guess, from this opening round, which was Italy versus Namibia. And again, we're only going to touch on this slightly, just because there's a lot more games, or you could say bigger games that happened throughout this round. And again, look, Italy did win pretty impressively. It was 52-8, which is a pretty convincing scoreline. But what did you think on that sense? Do you think it was kind of seen? Did you think it was going to happen like that anyway, or did you think it would be more, or did you think it would be less? What was your take on that?
I honestly thought that it would be a little bit less because we actually saw a bit of a trend with a lot of the really low-ranked sides. In the first halves, they were in the contest because in this game, I believe at halftime it was 17 points to 8 in favour of Italy, Namibia pushing them early, and the trend was that a lot of these lower-ranked sides were getting themselves the first try. Of course, we're going to mention that in the Ireland versus Romania game. But Namibia, very good showing from them in this World Cup. Even though that scoreline, a lot of people will look at it and go, it was a one-sided affair. I think that the heat really started to get to some of the sides throughout that second half. But yeah, Namibia, I'm looking forward to seeing them play in Uruguay because we know that those two sides have played more recently and the Namibians were able to get themselves the win. And I'm also curious about next week to see whether or not they can try and keep up with the ABs throughout the first maybe 10 or 20 minutes, or whether we're going to see the All Blacks absolutely firing. They'll be frustrated, they'll be annoyed. Namibia, I feel like they'll feel a little bit the same because they had moments in that game up against the Italians where it looked like, hang on, first upset of the Rugby World Cup, but it didn't quite happen for the Namibians.
No, exactly. And again, a lot of the Italians I thought were pretty impressive. I think Orbisi was probably the guy that stood out for me. I'd say in that game in terms of the back line. Because again, when you look at the warm-ups, I mean, Capuzzo as well as Monteoni were literally on fire throughout most of their games. I think it was that Romania game where I think both of them did pretty well and got tries in that front. And again, obviously Capuzzo did get a try for himself as well in this game. But just what Kabisi really just controlled that kind of back line pretty well. Was really good in terms of his playmaking. So I just thought he was in my opinion, my man of the match in that game. But anyway, we'll move on then from the Italian game on to the next one, which I do believe was what was it? It was the Ireland Romania, and that's look, by the way, I wasn't able to watch this game live when it happened, but my word, when I saw that scoreline just keep ticking up and up and up, I was like, oh my gosh, Ireland they're looking ready. They've definitely made a statement, winning 82 points to 8. I mean, is this the game that you did? Because by the way, if you haven't checked it out, we did a video on your channel, which we kind of went over predictions. And was this the one that you predicted 80, somewhere in the 80s, or was it for another one?
It was for another one. It was actually next week's game between the Springboks and Romania, but a relatively similar scoreline that I predicted for that game is actually what we got here. I only predicted Ireland to end up with around that 55 mark, I believe, for this game. But once again, Romania, that first try of the contest, that really fired up everyone. And I feel like that is the beauty of this Rugby World Cup, is no matter what, the funny thing is, would you like to know a fun stat, Tim?
Yes, I would, of course.
The only team to not score a try in the opening round was England.
Yes, it doesn't surprise me, in all honesty. It does not surprise me.
And yet they got themselves a 17-point win, so it makes you wonder a little bit, doesn't it, in terms of how does that kind of replicate how these two sides, or how the sides in this Rugby World Cup are going to go head-to-head. Romania, they showed aggression early on, and yeah, beautiful bit of play, get that first try, but then Ireland, we knew they were going to be able to fire back after that first one. It was only a matter of time, and then they just repeatedly kept crossing that try line. Johnny Sexton getting himself 2 tries. Tyg Byrne getting 2.
He was really good. Yeah.
He was. Johnny Sexton, he's one of those players now that I know when he was dealing with that suspension issue, everyone said if he's not available at 10 for the World Cup, the Irish just won't feel as confident moving forward. But he really stepped up in this game, managed to get out of it scot-free in terms of injuries, although there was a moment when he scored his first try that it looked like maybe he ended up with some sort of wrist. Tyg Byrne getting himself 2, Peter O'Mahony getting 2, and then also I believe there was one other, which was Bundy Arki managing to cross the try line twice. So Ireland, I'll be feeling confident after that first game. Of course, next week they have got themselves the week off, and then it is the Springboks and then Scotland for their last 2 games. So it does get tough from here for Ireland, but I think they'll very much enjoy this rest week, tactically building towards those 2 massive games. But moving on now to the next game that did take place. These games were all back to back to back to back. My sleep schedule is still not fixed from this weekend. I think we were up for about 60 hours and we managed 6 hours of sleep. So that's not recommended.
And by the way, Ireland do actually play Tonga next week. They actually do play a game.
Oh, they do have a game. So it's Tonga, then South Africa, then the week off, then Scotland.
I think that's how it is, yeah.
Okay. My apologies. I think the Springboks have got the last week off, though, of that group, don't they? So that they are fresh for those quarterfinals. I actually like that. I
actually prefer that from a mock perspective. So, yeah, we'll see if it pays off or not. But, yeah, I guess like you said, we'll move on then towards the next game, which is Australia versus Georgia. I'd say, I'm going to say it's an impressive win. I just think it's one of those where it's good to see the Wallabies get their first win under Eddie Jones. That's really the statement which they needed. Again, 35 points, 15. It's a good scoreline overall. Again, I think if there was anyone who, I don't think anyone would have said, if there was one player to step up in this game, it would have been Ben Donaldson. I mean, I don't think anyone would have made that mark for sure. But yeah, he was just all over the place. I mean, he got 2 tries for himself. I mean, one of the tries was kind of a bit of like an interception kind of where he just kind of went through, took the ball, and just went around the left wing and just scored it himself. But yeah, it was good. It was a really good play from him, actually. And again, he got a lot of the kicks themselves. It seems like, in a weird way, he's kind of playing that. It was the comparison I had to make was like the Reece Hodge role, really for this Wallabies side. But I don't know, he's not really the kind of Reece Hodge kind of guy because he's. I don't think he's better in terms of his his long kicking in that, but in terms of like what he gives you in terms of just another playmaker, I think he's better than Reece Hodge maybe in terms of playmaking. So I liked it. I liked it from that game. But yeah, well, what did you think overall from it?
I think that Australia, they'll be very happy to have walked away with their first win, and I feel like Georgia in this game, it seems to be that, I mean, it was impressive that they got themselves the 2 tries, but they still need to be able to score more throughout the game. I expected them to actually score in the first half rather than the second. Normally they are a little bit more of a firing out of the gates kind of side and then dropping off a bit at the end, but Australia, under Eddie Jones' first ever win, he was talking about it all throughout the build-up of this Rugby World Cup. He said that he's saving it for when they get out there on the field. Ben Donaldson, his first start at international rugby at 15.
It's crazy.
He showed that he should be that option.
Well.
Yeah. And they're going to be playing Fiji next week, which I feel will be an extremely important game for both sides. Now that we're seeing Wales get themselves a victory as well, Fiji walking away from that game with 2 bonus points, so that will boost them up just that little bit more. But yeah, overall, Australia, they've chosen the right time to come right if this is the Wallabies redemption arc.
Exactly.
Because at the start of a World Cup on the, well, I know it's harsh to say, but on the easier side of the draw, theoretically, means that maybe that is the momentum.
I don't think it's harsh at all. I think most fans understand there's one side obviously that's tougher than the other. But I mean, the other difficult thing for the Wallaby, from a Wallaby perspective, is that I saw that Tate McDermott actually won't be available for this Fiji game because he has a concussion. So he'll be on standby just in terms of the rules for I think 12 days. So obviously that won't make him ready in time obviously for that Fiji game. So it's a big loss because again, I'm not saying Nick White's bad at all, by the way, but it's just the way that the Wallabies play. It's not really how Nick White. It's not really his style. If it makes sense, where he goes quick passing and all this, and just because Tim McDermott he sniped between the lines, and that's what I kind of like about him. But again, I think they're going to obviously rely on what's his name, Isaiah Fines. Come on, obviously, as maybe off the bench. Maybe he even starts. You never even know. But we'll see what happens. Because Eddie Jones obviously has always a trick underneath his sleeves. So, I guess moving on towards this next game, which in my opinion, I would arguably say was the most impressive, I'd say, win out of all of them, I'd say, within round one. And it was England versus Argentina. And that was the most impressive victory, I'd say, just because you have to remember that, England literally had a red card. And again, yes, and it was seen as a yellow. We remember obviously the rules. It's put as a yellow first, then it was then moved into a red. But again, to be down with 14 men practically for 70 minutes of the game, and still carry on to win. I was impressed. I was really impressed with how they actually kind of just controlled the game, made sure that Argentina wasn't able to kind of come into their own half. They just kept pressuring them, and again, they just added up the points for that drop goals. I mean, a lot of English people are definitely saying, we're using the greater than sign with George Ford and then Wilkinson, which I found pretty funny. But what was your take on the game overall? Because out of all the games, it was definitely different. So what do you think?
Different is a good way of describing it. I would say Argentina, I mentioned it during the game, they were playing like the All Blacks. Drop balls, penalties conceded.
Exactly.
And they just didn't allow themselves at all into the game, which I think was a bit of a shock for a lot of people because it seemed like Argentina going into this World Cup were in some decent form, beating Spain by about 60 points, looking like they were going to be scoring tries for fun. But England just completely mitigated the Argentine attack, and they did get themselves that red card early, of course, with Tom Curry. I think the refereeing, we're going to have to talk about that for this round near the end because we talked about consistency, and I feel like we had nowhere near that throughout round number one of the Rugby World Cup, but it was given as the red card. And England's argument, if people were saying you didn't score tries, they won the game. They won it by 17 points. They were a man down for that 70 minutes as well. And I feel like it was almost a bit of a, well, if we're going to have to play with 14 here, we might as well we'll make it boring if you want us to make it boring. But I think it was exciting with the fact that they kept on going for that drop goals. It had that throwback vibe, like people were saying, Johnny Wilkinson.
Like
and the crowd were actually enjoying it, which I felt was kind of awesome to see.
Like it reminded me of like when Wilkinson dropped that drop goal, like where all the England fans behind were just stepping up and kind of like yes, like literally the exact same thing happened with George Ford. Like every single time he did the drop goal, I was like, come on, we want more of it, So it's kind of cool actually to see that. And again, hopefully England will hopefully not have to go down that route for all the games they play. But again. But still very impressive, in my opinion, in terms of what they were able to do with a red card. Just to say that one more time, because that is very hard to do, by the way, guys. And for 70 minutes, that's pretty impressive.
And also, this was the game that was supposed to be the closest of Pool D. So England, they knew they needed a win. They knew that even if they played a scrappy game of rugby and it wasn't the prettiest thing to watch, walking away with 4 points in that game was all that mattered because now they've got that little bit of a safety net. Whereas Argentina, because we've seen Japan win their game, because we're seeing Samoa, Chile take on each other, they'll end up with some points on the board, one of those two sides. And then all of a sudden Argentina find themselves just dropping a little bit further down the pecking order. Japan and England, the two winners, they are playing next week. One of those two sides going to be sitting in maybe 9 or 10 points at the end of this round. So it's going to be very intriguing to see how Argentina go from here, but they do need to win every single game to now be able to get through to the stage of the quarterfinals, which a lot of people felt was already half by secured heading into this Rugby World Cup, which is, I guess, just one of the curveballs. Probably the biggest upset of the weekend, I would argue, was this game here because of the scoreline, because of the way England were able to keep it in their favour and just not allow Los Pumas, a side that I believe yourself picked as maybe the dark horse of this competition.
I did. So it's just, it did surprise me.
Yeah. But yeah, England getting themselves a win in this World Cup. They've got experience in the past and they'll be looking to continue that momentum up against the Japanese.
Yeah. Again, literally with the Japanese now, I mean, again, we're just going to touch on this very quickly, guys, but with the Japanese game versus Chile, they did win pretty convincingly, 42 points to 12. Again, it was one of those games where I think Japan just kind of steamrolled. Chile actually got the first try in this game. So they actually got their first ever try in the Rugby World Cup. So from that sense, obviously a huge, it's a great thing for Chile. That's the thing you really want going into the Rugby World Cup. For your nation's first time in this tournament is to get a try. That might sound crazy, but it's really kind of like the spark which can kind of give your team for the rest of the games you'll play. So that was really big in terms of a Chile perspective. But of course, as the game kind of grew on and as the game went on, Japan just grew stronger, and obviously those tries kind of slowly got in, and obviously just kept going up and up. So it was pretty impressive display from Japan because again, we haven't seen much of that, I'd say, throughout this, particularly from the warm-ups. So I thought that was pretty impressive. But what do you think of the game overall? Again, we're already touching this very quickly, but what was your perspective?
I think Chile, they did show, even though they're ranked 22nd in the world, that there is a chance that in the future they may be able to continue to grow up those rankings. At the end of the day, only 3 of their players play outside of Chile. In their whole side, a lot of these guys have full-time jobs outside of rugby, some of them quitting their jobs to be able to take part in this Rugby World Cup.
Yeah.
And to be able to walk away with that first ever try, Rodrigo Fernandez, he's going to be a guy that people remember as the first ever to do it for the Chileans. Also getting themselves that try a little bit later on in the game of Escobar. But I knew that Amato Fakatava was going to be a danger, just with the size, just with the form that he's had throughout the Pacific Nations Cup, and he was able to do just that. One of the 7 try scorers throughout the first round. But I do want to give a massive shout out, first of all, to Chile's number 9, Torrealba. If that man does not have a contract with one of the biggest sides around the world by the end of this Rugby World Cup, I would be extremely surprised, because he had an absolutely phenomenal game. We've got to remember, this was up against a Japanese side that still were able to score 42 points. And by the end of the game, people were still wondering whether Torrealba would be in with a shot of getting man of the match. So yeah, give the man a contract. If no one wants him overseas, we'll take him in Super Rugby. I think Blues would take him. Get rid of Finlay Christie. Get Torrealba in.
No. I mean, I guess for Sam Knock, I'd take him out, but but no, I think if you're gonna give him a contract, he has to start. So maybe. I mean, he's pretty young. Is he young? I can't actually remember if he's young or not.
That's the thing. There's a lot of unknowns in this Chilean side, I believe, and that's the slightly exciting part of things. Is because no one really knows these players, and now they're starting to see him. He is actually 27 years of age, so he's a little bit older, but with age comes experience, and wisdom. And he just played like an experienced halfback, like someone who had played 50 caps, And speaking of 50 caps, you didn't have your wig on for the Faf de Klerk 50th cap celebration, of course. We have to bring it up because people will be asking, where was Tim's blonde locks? But we're at that game, South Africa versus Scotland. How was the atmosphere of that fixture?
Oh, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. And first of all, I just want to address with the whole Fat McCurk hair. I mean, I actually went to a shop, by the way, in Manchester to find it, but for some odd reason, they had blonde hair, but it's just too long. It's just it wasn't able
could have got some scissors and given it a bit of a snip.
I could have, but it looks so weird. If you have a snap, I don't know, it just looks a bit odd. But at the end of the day, look, the atmosphere was brilliant. I mean, again, I'd say most of the crowd, you could say, were probably Bok fans. There's a lot of cheering, going Bok. There's all of that, so it's kind of good to hear. But I mean, the game overall, I mean, it's kind of what I said in my match day vlog. It was really just very edgy, I'd say, from the very start. in terms of what we saw, particularly in that first half, because both sides obviously kind of just test each other out in terms of the set pieces as well as kind of just the plays that they had. I mean, from a lineup perspective, I mean, both sides did pretty well in that sense. However, from a scrum, Scotland were actually pretty dominant, I'd say, in that area. And it kind of worried me going into the second half because, wow, this is not a good sign. And Franco Herber was not, because he actually mentioned he was actually one of the standout, you could say, props going into this Rugby World Cup in terms of form. But man, that opening half, he just was not at it. But again, just like that, they flipped the switch, and yeah, he came, the whole front row just completely changed, and obviously won a few more penalties for the Box, which allowed them really to kind of open up the game. Because I mean, really in that opening, the opening minutes of that second half, that's where we kind of saw, the tries kind of creep in, with Peter Toy as well as Curly Lorenza, and yeah, I mean that Curly Lorenza try was like, whoo, it was nasty. Like Matty Limbock with the no look, just like yeah, just a little no look there, but no, it was a good try, really good try from him, and then again they kind of just sealed the victory overall. Really made it hard for the Scottish to actually kind of like get a try in this game, which is pretty impressive actually. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, with I guess like Finn Russell. I mean, there's a whole fight that happened with the first half. I'm not sure if you saw that, but a bit of a ruffle there. Evan Etzbeth, of course, smiling at his kind of just as he normally does when he holds someone up. He's like, just gives him a little smile. He's like,
his eyes go very wide, don't they, Etzbeth? They kind of keep on going wider and wider as he gets more excited.
He knows that he's going to be on the big screen, so that's why he wants to have his shiny teeth out. But no, I mean, look, overall, just a very impressive display. Just really wanted to obviously just be there live. That was kind of a cool experience. But yeah, I mean, what was your take in terms of the game?
My take was I've just realised Scotland didn't score a try in this opening round either, unfortunately. So that stat at the start was slightly wrong. I bet you the people who listen to that and comment about it won't get this far into the podcast. Exactly. So I do apologise if you are still here and you did hear me say about England. Scotland were very close to scoring. What I guess I could say is Scotland should have had a try when Darcy Graham had that line break. They were extremely close to finding that one last pass that would have helped them get over the try line. But yeah, half-time in this game, 6 points to 3 in favour of the Springboks. Some people were saying that the first half, I saw the word boring, but I think it was anything but. It had a real, old-school test match, hard, gritty, grindy, both sides wanting it more. And the benefit of this game for the first half in terms of the kicking was that both sides were contesting their own kicks. And I feel like that added that little bit of an extra edge into this contest compared to a game like New Zealand and France where both sides were just kicking down the middle of the field for the sake of it, trying to get the other team to kick it into touch to win the territory battle. This one, there were up and unders. There were sides, little moments that were, looking like they were going to swing the momentum. But the Box in that second half, I don't know what was said at half time, but it certainly fired them up that little bit more because they came out firing and they actually opted to go for a little bit less of that kicking throughout the second half. In the first, they were kicking from around halfway, sometimes even inside of the territory of Scotland's second half. That cross kick of Marnie Libok, like you mentioned, a thing of beauty. I know that people are still back on his back now because of the missed kicks that he did have. I mentioned about it on the live stream as well. I said the same people who were praising him last week are now the same people who are writing him off. So you got to make sure you're sticking behind him because he is the fly half. Who else are they going to go with? Pollard at the moment, he's not available. And until he is added into the squad, Marnie Libok is the guy that you've got. It's the similar situation to Caleb Muntz of Fiji because people were writing him off. And now that he's not there, you see the real impact that people are like, oh, no, now we miss Muntz. Sorry about what I said last week and the week prior.
I want to get into this. We'll get more into that game because I think that's really the game I want to talk about the most. But yeah, just before we get into that, really with the South African one, I felt like I saw there was I think it was a post-match interview, if I'm not mistaken, with Khaleesi. I think it was Khaleesi, where he talked about how people are kind of accountable for everything, and not everyone is perfect, and how they have different attributes and skills which they bring to the table. And I thought with Manny Libok, again, even though he missed a few kicks in the process, he was the one who set up that try and was pretty impressive overall. So I just thought he's someone I've always kind of backed. I think since the Rugby Championship, since that, I guess that, what was it, the Warby game? I think since round one, I think I've always been pretty. I kind of like what I saw from him in terms of a block perspective. But yeah, if he can just continue that on, I think he can definitely progress well. But yeah, okay, let's now talk about the big one. Obviously, Wales versus Fiji. Yeah, I mean, again, both of us. Am I actually no? I think you actually did say Wales would win this, right? Because you're obviously.
I did, but then on the day on the live stream, I said that my heart was telling me Fiji might sneak it.
Of course. Yep.
It was one of those games that we knew it was going to be close. We just didn't realize it was going to be as close as it ended up being. With it going down to those final minutes.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that when the big talking point of this game, there's probably two. We'll first talk about just what happened at the end in terms of Semi Radradra, because again, you have to remember that the Welsh actually were in a pretty comfortable lead going into this. They were like 32 points up to it was 14 or 16 at the time, and they were 10 minutes left on the clock, and I was like, okay, this doesn't look like. It looks like it's kind of a too far of a reach now for the Fijians to kind of come back into this. But they scored 2 quick tries. I believe it was Josh. Who scored it? Was it? I think
so they ended up Masaki Donge, I think, actually, who got that last try, and Tui Sova was the second last.
Exactly. So I know that, but he came back, and I was like, oh my gosh, I actually have a chance here. And then obviously that the whole play comes up. I think it was allowed, if I'm not mistaken, how this happened, where they're passing the ball out, and I think I can't remember who made that final pass, but when you look at it just on a freeze frame, it's just there's 4v2, and you have Semi Radradra. Out of all the people you want in that position, he is the guy you want in that position. There's no other player in the world I would take. He's particularly this Fijian team. That's the player you want on the ball when in a 4-on-2 situation, and he dropped it. I couldn't believe what I saw. I was like, oh my gosh, I could have won this. Again, there is obviously still the question if they would have converted it or not, because it would depend on where the kick would have been.
Yeah, and I think that for Fiji, it just looked like if they were going to score, it was going to be out wide, and I feel like Wales knew that if they conceded out wide, the kicking accuracy throughout that game off the tee for Fiji had already been a bit shaky. So it was one of those scenarios that Fiji, if they had scored, they may have been within one, but then they also may have missed that kick. But I think that just the fight that Fiji were showing throughout the later stages of that game, we've seen it for the Fijian Drua scoring 3 tries in 5 minutes. We knew that Fiji were never out of this game, even when there was that little bit of a disadvantage on the scoreboard. Dan Bigger, whoever pissed him off before the game certainly did a good job, didn't they? Because he was fired up beyond belief.
Make sure you're tackling. Jeez, this is
George North. The thing is, he was picking on one of the biggest guys in the backline. If George North wanted to, he'd drop him like he was a sack of spuds. But instead, Dan Bigger knew that he would be able to try and possibly fire him up that little bit more. And he actually ended up with player of the match in the end, Dan Bigger, for his performance.
Even Matty Libble caught man of the match for the previous one as well.
True. So, it's one of those scenarios that this first round, I think we're learning how important the fly half and the fullback are going to be.
Yes,
besides. Because Dan Bigger, brilliant work. Johnny Sexton, also in this Fijian game, we saw more of Dan Bigger than we saw of Tadej Teller in those kind of 2 roles.
I agree.
For Australia, it was more of Ben Donaldson, but partnered with a little bit of Carter Gordon at 10. And All Blacks game, we saw a lot more of Jalibert than we did of Richie Mo'unga throughout the 80 minutes as well.
I agree. So just to kind of finish this off, because I want to kind of add this bit of a segment, and now I think I want to do this just because I think you guys will enjoy this as well. I'm going to give you guys we're going to just go over what we believe is what are the best player of the round. We're going to give you guys, I guess, the player who kind of stood out, who you wouldn't expect to stand out, and the team that you thought just were the best, in your opinion. So I already said
I should mention, Tim has only just told me this, so I will have to have a little bit of a think about it while he has given his.
Exactly. So I already said mine beforehand, which was England in terms of the team I thought were the most impressive, you could say, throughout round 1. Again, I already said in my reasons that, they have the red card and everything, that they just control the game very nicely. So for me, they were the team of the round. In terms of the player of the round, I will actually give it towards George Ford. I just thought that, again, he kind of carried that performance really by himself. And, the drop goal is just, it's incredible because you don't really see it often in terms of how a game is dictated by drop goals themselves. So I thought it was pretty impressive overall. So that's the reason why he's my kind of player of the round. And then in terms of a player who stood out, who you didn't expect to stand out, I'm probably going to give it towards Ben Donaldson. I think he's the player who, again, we remember this was his first game for the Wallabies, if I'm not mistaken, in a Rugby World Cup against the Georgians. So, and he got 2 tries to his name as well. Did pretty well in terms of the tee. So kicking tee, I mean, and yeah, I think that's kind of the 3 I would say in terms of this round, in terms of my player. Well, you could say standout player, and then of course the team of the round. So, what about yourself? What do you think?
Well, I've been thinking about it this whole time and I can't decide. But the thing is, I'm looking at a couple of those slightly lower teams, but then the problem is, I guess, can they be a team of the round if they have lost type thing? So I'm looking at someone like, I thought Namibia, they were pretty strong, but they only got 8 points.
They were actually pretty impressive. The score, like you said, doesn't reflect what happened in that game. But yeah, I understand what you mean.
So I'll go Australia for team of the round. Okay, as my voice starts to cut out, that is due to, of course, all the talking. But I'd say that they weren't expected to win that game by as many as they did. People thought that it could have been a really close one between them and Georgia. It would be easy to say Ireland is the team of the round, but we've got to remember they were up against the Romanians, and there could be a chance that we see that kind of scoreline up against Romania a few more times. Because I was thinking of player of the round about Johnny Sexton as an option. But player of the round, I would actually probably give it to Jesper Wiese, to be honest.
Whoa, okay.
Mainly because I feel like he was one of those players who was selected in that Springboks lineup that people were like, should he have even been there? Should it have been Dwayne Vermeulen in the starting lineup? And Jesper Wiese having a huge amount of game line carries, getting turnovers for his side, and just really showing he's found the form at just the right time. So I'll give a big shout out to Jesper Wiese. And then the last option was the player that I think it was the player that we didn't expect to do well, but they did.
Kind of the surprise option, to say the least, in terms of player who stood out.
Okay, well, I feel like you already probably know who I'm going to go with here, which is, of course, Marcelo Tarilba for Chile as the number 9. I think he was, to be honest, I'd argue the best halfback of the weekend.
Look, I'll be completely honest with you. I haven't seen the whole game, so maybe I have to look back at the whole game because I've only seen the highlights. So it kind of ruins, I guess, kind of like what you see from a whole game perspective. So I'll take a look back at that and see like what you're on about here. Because again, for what I saw, there wasn't highlights are obviously very short in what they can give you, so you don't get to see much of the action. But he did look pretty good from what I've heard so far. I mean, a lot of people have talked about him, and like you said, he could be up for. I mean, this is the great thing about a Rugby World Cup is that it gives people, particularly rugby players, obviously, the opportunity to go out there and also just make a name for themselves and allow teams across the world to like take an interest in them, and obviously maybe even decide to transfer rims. So this is why I love kind of like the Rugby World Cup, because it just allows players to kind of just get. Especially for a team like Chile, like you said, a lot of people it's not really like a full-time profession. So for him to get like a contract would be like incredible. So I like the shout. That's a good shout there. But I guess other than that, guys, we're gonna leave it here. That is episode 13 of this Rugby Recap in terms of round 1, we can say a World Cup review here. Again, just obviously let us know in the comments what you guys think in terms of those 3, in terms of player of the round, really surprise player of the round, you could say. And then team of the round. Let us know in the comments, of course. Like and subscribe. And yeah, guys, we'll see you guys next time.